And honestly, that might be the most terrifying theory I've come up with. Drive them to extinction eventually, because without us being there in the villages and actually setting them up, they won't be able to make more villagers. Anyways, I blew up his house right after. Before I start the video, make sure you guys let me know that you actually like this type of content by liking, sharing, and subbing. And yeah, see you guys in the next one. I brought a villager with its mom and made a baby, and then I killed that child and his parents. Let's talk about incest. In Minecraft, you can breed animals together and make kids, so you can kill them for meat later. But anyways, something that's always stuck with me is that why the hell are you able to make two animals together and make more animals after that? That doesn't make sense. Basically, why are you able to breed a child with its mother or father and make another one? This isn't just for one specific mob, this is for all mobs of Minecraft, which makes no sense. There will be inbreeding and all sorts of genetic diseases. Like for example, have you ever heard of Muller's ratchet? Okay, before I explain that, let me explain how genetic variation works. When a man and a woman love each other very much, they go into a special room where they do push-ups on each other and serve whipped cream to each other. And this happens, they come out with a baby. But that baby is from the mother and father because it's a mix and will never be the same as the mother and the father. Now let's look at sex, which I know is something that 99% of my audience, including me, will never get to experience. Sexual reproduction is the primary thing that we use for variation. The thing that makes you different from your mom and your dad. What happens during sexual reproduction is known as meiosis, which is the process of making new gametes, which are just sperm and egg. In meiosis, we have two key processes that allow for variation: genetic recombination and independent assortment. In genetic recombination, at some point you'll have the chromosomes of the gamete break apart and recombine randomly. So your mom's chromosomes and your dad's chromosomes will break, recombine, and I cannot stress this enough, randomly. This is super important, they're random. So when they come back together, the chromosomes will be completely different. Then we also have independent assortment, which basically, when the gamete splits in meiosis to make new cells, will randomly take different genes with it. Like, let's say you have like 5 colors, right? You'll have red, blue, green, and yellow. That was 4, but since I'm a kindergarten dropout, I can't tell the difference between 4 and 5 apparently. Let's say they split into 2 cells: red, green, yellow, and blue. They'll always appear in random pairs. For example, we have red and yellow, blue and red and yellow. There's any number of possible pairs. And imagine that, but with like 46 different chromosomes. That's like 8.3 million possible combinations. So these processes help a lot with genetic variation and make sure that you won't end up exactly like your parents, because if you did, that would be kind of bad. That independent assortment and genetic recombination give you different traits and make you look different from your parents. But each animal in Minecraft, if you breed them, they look the exact same. The cows, the chickens, the foxes, the dogs, the pandas, they're all the same. And their kids can breed with their parents, and it makes no sense. Animals literally have built-in reflexes to not mate with their cousins. Birds can literally eject their sibling sperm just so they won't breed with their siblings. Even in humans, we go through a mechanism known as like the Westermark effect, which, explained simply, is just a psychological phenomenon where people, humans, when they've lived with people they consider family, they make those connections in their brain and say, oh, this person is family, so maybe I shouldn't do the oinky sploinky with them. Oinky sploinky, sex, same thing. But I'm not going to talk about the animals in Minecraft. I want to be talking about the villagers. I believe that the villagers were originally the ancient builders and actually bred themselves into extinction. Because with the villagers, for one, I can breed a villager mom and child together, which is very disgusting, but very interesting, and indicates to me that they have actually done this before. And notice their characteristics, like their big nose and them not being able to make normal noises, instead speaking in moans and grunts when they trade with you, which I don't know what the fuck they're saying. One of the main symptoms of inbreeding are structural deformities, which is what we see with their big ass Squidward nose when they charge you 34 emeralds for a pen and paper after you accidentally hit them because they just want to walk in your way for some reason. Well, maybe if you weren't so stupid and walked in my way, that I wouldn't hit you inbred A massively popular example is the Habsburg's jaw. The Habsburg's jaw is a famous feature that was prominent in the Habsburg's royal family in the 13th century because they wanted to keep it in the family and they wanted to make sure that the royal bloodline was pure. But before we get into that, I need to explain how genes work in a very basic way. You know those memes that like talk about like, oh yeah, chemists have to like learn about like some random chemical that only has like a property that's only like available on the third Tuesday every like 3,000 years. It's the same with Mendel's genetics. Mendel, I started learning about Mendel from like grade 9 and into university. I realized genes do not work the way that Mendel says they work. It is an exception, and it's such a small exception that 99% of your genes do not work that way, but yet we still have to learn it. But anyways, the way that Mendelian genetics work is we have alleles, which are just different variations of genes. For example, we have a gene for eye color, and you get an allele from your mom for blue eyes and a allele from your dad for green eyes. Now, those alleles can be dominant or recessive. When you inherit a trait, you get two, one from mom, one from dad, like I said before. So these traits can either be dominant or recessive. If a trait is dominant, you only need one of the allele to take over. For example, let's say blue is dominant and green is recessive. If you have blue-green, well, blue takes over and the kid's gonna have blue eyes. But let's say we have a recessive trait. The only way for a kid to have green eyes is green is recessive. You need double green. Now, again, this only happens with 1% of the genes, but it is still very useful to know. Now, with Asperger's jaw gene, it's normally recessive, but inbreeding increases the probability of getting those recessive genes. Think of it like if we have two siblings, chances are they maybe have a good dominant jaw gene, but they may also carry a recessive Habsburg gene. And if they do the oinky splinky, then the kid has a higher chance of having the bad gene. It'll have double Habsburg's gene, which means that they'll have a Habsburg's gene. Now, when siblings or closely related family members keep going over and over and over again, there's a concept known as Miller's ratchet, where basically if you keep mating with your siblings over and over and over again, the bad traits within both of you will rack up generation to generation and continue to persist over time. Anyways, in the Habsburg's family, there are many who had to deal with the consequences of inbreeding. One of these people is the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. I'm sorry, I don't know what V is in Roman numerals. He had an extremely hard time eating and speaking due to his protruding jaw, and his descendants also gained many other deformities, such as a swollen lip and a hooked nose, and an extremely large tongue that made it hard to speak, and cognitive delays and eventually infertility, which sounds very much like what the villagers have. They have asymmetrical deformities that inhibit their ability to do other things. And honestly, in my opinion, I believe that the ancient builders were at some point dying and their populations became extremely small. And the thing is, when populations become extremely small, there's a high probability that you may mate with someone that's related to you. And as a result, well, you get the villagers. When these populations are so small that they start breeding with their siblings, well, this is a result of the allele effect, where basically a population is so small that it drives the population into extinction. And this is one of the ways that they go into extinction. Populations so small that they are forced to breed with each other. And because those genetic diseases keep racking up and racking up and racking up, well, then what happens is that you no longer have a population that's nice and healthy and birthing healthy kids. You're now getting a dying population. And not only that, but do you wonder why there's so little villagers? The reason why there's probably so little villagers is because, well, they're dying. They're a dying race. Villagers, as you've probably seen before, they're smart. They've been able to build iron golems. They can farm, and not only that, they're capable of trade. They know economics. Even if they do charge 64 emeralds for a pen and paper, they do know economics. And you'd naturally be thinking, if there's a group of people this smart, why haven't they taken over the Minecraft world? The thing is, they can't, because as I said before, they're dying. And see, they can't spread normally. So one of the symptoms of inbreeding, or the drawbacks, is that your offspring may become infertile, which I believe is going to eventually happen to the villagers, because just to breed, the villagers need our help. We literally need to feed them, get them into an enclosed room, and let them breed. And that leads me to believe that they may have a certain type of, well, behavioral isolation. Now, this is commonly seen in hybrids of animals, right? So like, let's say a bird and a donkey are able to make a kid, right? Birds need to do courtship dances and make sounds and make songs and stuff to like court other birds. So with that hybrid, since it's part bird and part donkey, it's not going to be able to do those behaviors to actually court a mate. So that would be behavioral isolation. I believe that the villagers have this. Also, while recording for this video, I saw this villager war farming, and I don't know why I brought it up, I just felt the need to. Anyways, I blew up his house right after. They don't know how to like actually court each other. So for one, they can't really exactly go on and breed by themselves. They actually need help, and that could cause their population to shrink down. Now, even though this is mostly in hybrids, it can also be seen in inbred people as well, where they have very similar behaviors to it. So not being able to court each other is also something that might happen and drive them to extinction eventually, because without us being there in the villages and actually setting them up, they won't be able to make more villagers. Or at least they might incidentally make some, but it'll be extremely hard for them to make even more. Also, have you ever wondered, the villagers, when they get bitten by a zombie, right? They almost instantly get turned into a zombie villager. So, you know how in video games, there's usually like let's say Last of Us, right? There's always that one person who's able to like have that immunity to like a disease, like a world-ending disease. That is because of sexual selection. In sexual selection, like I said before, your genes are randomly mixed up, broken apart, recombined, and then they make new genes. And because of those new genes, and because of sexual selection, you can keep clapping and clapping and clapping until you make someone that's able to resist the viral infection. The villagers don't have this at all, and obviously I think that's because they keep clapping their siblings. Because if you keep doing it with like a person that's genetically similar to you, you're not going to be able to have new genes come out of that. So it's going to be extremely hard to even resist the virus and survive. So is this what Mojang actually intended? Definitely not. The breeding mechanics exist because they're simply gameplay settings, not because the developers secretly want to stimulate population genetics. If we pretend that Minecraft is a real ecosystem for a second, it creates a really weird implication. Every species in the game, although they can breed endlessly with their own descendants and somehow never accumulate genetic disorders, there's only one species that seemingly does, and that's the villagers. Villagers are the only ones who actually look like something went wrong. All share the same exaggerated features, they communicate in grunts, they're completely isolated from any other human-like population. If the ancient builders really disappeared and only a tiny population remained, generation after generation of breeding within that small population could explain why modern villagers actually become these monstrosities. So maybe the ancient builders weren't wiped out by the Wither or the Warden or some apocalyptic disaster. Maybe they survived. They just kept marrying their cousins until they evolved into Squidward's weird cousins. And honestly, that might be the most terrifying theory I've come up with.